Brexit, do you remember that? We decided we didn't want freedom of movement anymore, at least not with any of our European neighbours. But what about an agreement which means we could move freely between Britain and Australia? Well, that's the case being put forward by an Australian senator, arguing that UK and Australian citizens should be able to work and travel in the two countries after Brexit. He joins me now, Senator James Paterson. Good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
Nice to have you on Times Radio. So just explain what you're proposing.
Well, I should note for the record, I'm an advocate of Brexit as well. In fact, I was the only Australian politician to support it prior to the referendum in 2016. But what I'm advocating is a very natural return to close economic relations between Australia and the UK, the kind of economic relations that we used to have prior to your entry into the European Union. And that should be both unimpeded trade and unimpeded travel for citizens of both of our countries to be able to freely move through to work, to study, to travel for business in a way that I think would really enrich both our countries and a way that works because of our similarities.
And do you think this would be a popular idea in Australia?
Absolutely. In fact, since 2001, the number of Australians travelling to the United Kingdom for this sort of travel has declined by 73%. And that's as a result of the sort of immigration controls you've had to put in to the rest of the world in recent years because you haven't been able to control the immigration that you've had from the European Union. But polls in the UK show that actually Australians are the most popular migrants to the United Kingdom and that most people in the UK would like to have the same or more Australians visit. So I think it makes great sense for both Australia and the UK.
And why would Australia do this with the UK? Because, there are quite a lot of countries, at least geographically closer. Why the UK in particular?
Well, we've got already this exact agreement with New Zealand and it works remarkably well. Our economies are highly integrated, but in a way that respects the political sovereignty of both of our democracies. This is not an ever closer union. It's based on mutual recognition of our standards, not a harmonisation of regulation. The United Kingdom is the next most logical country for Australia to have this with, given our common heritage, our common culture, our common values, our common political and legal systems, and our common head of state.
And do you think that this is politically sellable in the UK? Because obviously bringing down net migration to the UK has been a promise of, several, and we'll get through them quite quickly, but several Conservative Prime Ministers now. Is it plausible, do you think, that this could happen?
Well, you'll know better than me, but Boris Johnson is an advocate of this idea going back to 2013. Polls by YouGov in 2016 and 2018 show a majority of UK residents want the same or higher levels of immigration from Australians and that we are the most popular migrants to the UK. So if there's any country in the world that you're going to do it with, I think Australia is going to be first on that list.
And what's the current situation? Because obviously movement between any country at the moment is pretty limited. What is the current situation in Australia in terms of lockdown and people being able to visit?
Well, Australia's probably got the hardest lockdowns in the world. It's very difficult to come here unless you're an Australian citizen or an immediate family member of an Australian citizen or a permanent resident. And in fact, Australian citizens actually have to ask for permission from the government to leave Australia if they want to travel abroad. So it's very strict measures, but that's been put in place because Australia has been much less affected by the coronavirus than most other countries, and we want to try and keep it that way as much as possible. But this is just a temporary measure. It's nothing that anyone in Australia would support becoming permanent or staying in place for the long term. And when we do return to more normal, I think the first thing many Australians will want to do is get on a plane to London.
Well, London is a good time to visit London right now because it's completely empty. I know from, going around looking at tourist attractions in London the last week or so, there is literally no one around. Just in terms
and the weather is better there than it is here, I can assure you of that.
I mean, it's not great here at the moment. In fact, I think it is raining looking out of the window.
Well, it's raining here too. So
there we are. You travel all that way and you still end up in the rain. Just in terms of the connection between Britain and Australia, so in the news this morning that Australia's ordered 25 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine being developed by Oxford University in partnership with the pharmaceutical firm AstraZeneca. Your Prime Minister Scott Morrison announcing that overnight, I think. Is that another example of the connections between the two countries?
Exactly. It's completely natural for us to have close cooperation on scientific matters, on vaccines, just as we already have close cooperation on security matters. We're both members of the Five Eyes network of intelligence sharing partners that also includes Canada, New Zealand, and the United States. It's the most intimate intelligence sharing arrangement in the world. And actually, it's started to branch out into the economic sphere. Australia's Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, has initiated a Five Eyes call of treasurers and finance ministers on a regular basis to coordinate on economic matters. And we've seen on issues like Hong Kong or Xinjiang in China that we have a very set of common values as well.
And just finally, in terms of having an agreement on free movement, is this something you'd pursue with the EU as a whole? Because obviously, then people in Australia could go to any EU country rather than just doing this with the UK.
I think that's much less likely between Australia and the European Union. We just don't have that same common history, those same common values, those same common institutions that we do with the UK. I think it's much more likely to work on a more direct basis with the United Kingdom.
Well, it's really good to speak to you. That's Australian Senator James Paterson talking to us about this idea. He's going to report out today on the idea of a freedom of movement agreement between the UK and Australia, which would mean that people could move backwards and forwards between the two countries.